Well, thank you for having me. I hope you all had a cup of regular coffee to keep yourself awake. I'm drinking one. Thank you for that introduction. I came to iconography late in life, about 25 years ago, and been trying ever since to perfect it. And you can't really perfect it because only God is perfection. What I have for you today is in 2012, I had an exhibit of work, icons, vestments, and contemporary icons, and some stained glass that traveled through Europe and went from Rome to San Gimignano to Prague to Warsaw to Krakow, back here to the States, and then was down in Baltimore at the cathedral, the old cathedral in Baltimore, and then it was here in Philadelphia at the Episcopal Cathedral. Iconography starts very early, and how it starts is that the Greeks and Romans would make images of their ancestors, and they would have ancestral worship. And so the image would be sculpted out of, if you were Greek, it was done in bronze. If you were Roman, it was done in stone, marble. This happens to be one of a number of different types of marble put together, but it's still an image that we could consider to be an image of a iconography, or an icon, which means image. This one is Roman. The Romans and also the Greeks, when they would have their images of their ancestors or their gods or goddesses, a lot of times at night, and here you see a woman burning incense. This is a fairly old, maybe 300 AD image, 300 BC, excuse me, image of a woman burning incense in front of an image of a deity. And they would chain the statue at night to the wall so that it would not leave, because they believed at night that the images became human and would leave. So a lot of statuary you will see in the back, or on the column that the statue was placed on there, you would see a chain of some type that would, and this is one here, if you could see that. So now we're moving up earlier. This is like 300 AD. This is from a place called Fayum, which is in the Egyptian desert in the west side. It's an oasis. And when they did some excavation in the early 1900s, they found mummies. And on the faces of the mummies, instead of the sculptural pieces that we would see like on the tombs of like King Tut and Ramses II and some of the other ones, which would be dimensional, these were flat. They were done with hot wax and pigment, which is a process that you have to be really fast because you don't want the wax to set. So they would put extenders into the wax, and they would use a brush and paint it. This is one of a young boy, very doughy-eyed, looking straight ahead. All the characteristics of the more contemporary or the newer icons that were created later on. And this one's got gold in the background. And he has we know he was an athlete because he has a laurel wreath made out of stamped gold. So those images that we see today of icons, traditional Russian, Greek, Crete, Coptic images that would have gold leaf in the background, here's kind of its prototype. Now we still don't have images in Christianity. We have very, very, very little images. We have tomb images of, let's say, the mystical supper, the Last Supper, painted in sepia, which is a brownish red color on a wall. Or we have the Madonna and Child done in sepia. But we don't have color representations as they have here in the Fayoum Oasis panels. There's a number of them in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. I think there's one or two in Washington, and there's rooms full in the museum in Cairo, the National Museum in Cairo, which unfortunately they're hard to see because the glass is dirty. But anyway, you know what they are when you see them. And they do have it in English, still typed index cards. You know, those little things we used to do papers on? Still typed index cards with the information on these images. I got interested in Sicily, even though I'm half Italian and half Sicilian. I got interested in Sicily when we brought the Icon program here at Villanova, but through the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, because no one here thought it would do any good, except from the first time on, we made a lot of money for the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. So we decided to go to Sicily, because Sicily is the melting pot of the Mediterranean. And everybody's been through it, from the Phoenicians on. You name it, they've been there. So in their DNA, they have Norman, they have North African, they have Greek, they have Italian, they have just about every kind of nationality. The El Magnifico, which is the president of the University of Messina, looked like a leprechaun. And he could trace his roots back till God knows how far back. But he had red hair, blue, green eyes, freckles, and fair skin. So it's pretty interesting when you stop to look at all that information, genetic information that's in those, in the people in Sicily. I'm going to jump really fast because what happens is that iconography takes off once Constantine moves the capital from Rome to Constantinople, and then once imagery started to pour into Christianity, starting with, let's say, the image of the young Adonis, which would be the young Christ, beardless. That it lasted a while, like the statue of the Good Shepherd that we all see, or maybe you haven't seen. But anyway, it's a young man with a sheep over his neck and he's looking to the left. Well, that is the corner of a sarcophagus. And there's 3 other statues. And if you never see the back of the statue, but the back of the statue, there's a wedge cut out of it so that it would fit into the sarcophagus. And it's a pagan sarcophagus. It's not a Christian sarcophagus. So when you look at that and you see that, you think, oh, there's Christ the young good shepherd. Well, no, it's the Adonis with the shepherd over his head, around his head. We also then all of a sudden start in the doors of Santa Susanna in Rome, Santa Sabina, excuse me. You'll see the first crucifixion scene carved into the doors. And you still can see that today, and it's amazing to see it because it's aged so beautifully, and the carving is very primitive, but in the fact that it's so primitive, it's elegant. You know, then you start jumping in back to Constantinople and this emperor, that emperor, and then all of a sudden you have the building of Hagia Sophia in 5 something. Justinian and Theodora, who built Hagia Sophia, and who also built St. Catherine's in the Sinai, the monastery of St. Catherine's in the Sinai, because in the top beams in the basilica, it still has their name on it. Even though they were never there or never saw it, their name is still there, and they still pray for the emperor and his mother. The emperor and the empress. So you have these wonderful people, pretty cruel, but still patronizing the arts to such an extent that when you go into Santa Sofia and you look in there and you figure, this is what it looks like now. Could you imagine it from floor to ceiling gold leafed with mosaics? Now they're starting to remove some of the whitewash and some of the plaster after it became a mosque, and they found a Christ and the Holy Virgin with Christ sitting on her lap, and a Michael the Archangel, and there's a number of lunettes that they have that you can also see. And then there's a church called the Curator Church, which is also in Constantinople, which is frescoed. And that has some of the most beautiful frescoes of the life of Christ. And the most famous one is the Anastasis, which is the resurrection, where you have Christ pulling Adam and Eve out of hell, purgatory, or wherever they were. So imagery starts to become important, and all of a sudden the face of Christ changes from a young Adonis to a man with a beard. And the reason why this happens is that in a town called Edessa in Turkey, you have what we believe now, what was there was the Shroud of Turin. And they saw on the shroud this face of this man, and it was a man with long hair, in fact, a ponytail, and a beard. So that's how you could tell the transition. When the beard and the short curly hair disappear, the Greek style, Roman style curly hair, to the long Semitic hair with the ponytail in the back. So from that point on, all images of Christ have those characteristics, as well as the characteristics of a little box that's here. For some reason, it shows that there was a little, and it's really the indentation in the sides of the middle of the eyebrows, which forms this little box. And if you look at those images, there's an amazing number of images of Christ. If you get one of those Images of Christ book, or even if you go online and look, you will see many images of Christ with those characteristics in it. In fact, if you take the Shroud of Turin and make transparencies of the other one and lay it on top of, there's like 37 points that are exactly the same. So somewhere along the line, these artists saw this and copied it, and then that became the canonical face of Christ. So using that, we have what I got infatuated with Sicily. I never wanted to go, but when I first went, we had the class there. I went back for Holy Week. And at the time, I was going to do watercolors. I'm a watercolorist by trade. Really never had to study it. It just came second nature. And I thought everybody could do it, you know. Any artist could do it, but that's not true. So I was going to do watercolors of these images, and I thought that would really be great. And then someone bought me a really nice camera with a chip in it, which I looked at the chip and didn't know where to put it. And of course I didn't open the box till I got to Sicily. Didn't realize that I had to charge the battery and everything else. But anyway, so I started taking photos of processions that would start on Wednesday of Holy Week till Easter Sunday. And some of these images I've used in my contemporary icons, making photographic references, taking things out, thank God for Photoshop, taking things out, not that I know it, I have someone who sits at it and I tell them what to do, but taking the image out and recreating another image, which we'll see at the end. But these are some of the images that were used. This is a sorrowful mother. As you can see, she has her heart pierced. This is the gentleman with the hood. He's not a Ku Klux Klan member. He's part of a sodality, men's sodality, that they used to, during the Middle Ages, during the plague, they would go into houses and take the bodies out and bury them. And we wanted to know why they never died. Well, because they covered themselves in clove oil. And clove oil is antibacterial. So they couldn't catch anything. They would saturate their clothing. They would go in, take the bodies out, put them on to the beds of carts, and then take them and bury them in the cemetery. So this fraternity well, they're both male and female. You can't tell because they're all hooded, but they're both male and female members. They carry different images, and here's an image he's carrying of the Ecce Homo, which Pilate said, "Behold the man." Now imagine 75 men or women mixed walking down the streets of a town called Enna in Sicily, which is on a hill. You could see, on a clear day, you could see the ocean. That's how high you are and how clear you can get it to see. Carrying these images of the Passion. There are certain cities, like the city of Trapani, which starts on Holy Thursday at 3 o'clock and ends Good Friday at 3 o'clock, and the procession continually goes through the streets, showing the mysteries, they call them. This is a little girl dressed up as the sorrowful mother, and she has her little rays around her head. Now you'll see like 20 people, 20 little girls dressed up like the sorrowful mother. This is one of the statues from Enna, and it's taken out of the church, and she's dressed, she's got real hair. Underneath is just kind of like twine and wood slats and everything. But, you know, I watched them actually put the wig on. They wouldn't let me take pictures, I could take it after, but put the wig on and then dress her, and she's there holding her heart. So these images, or parts of these images that you will see on the last part of this presentation, are some of the images that I used for the ediculi, the contemporary icons. We'll jump right to icons now. This is an icon of Blessed Miguel Augustine Pro. I have had devotion to him, and he was a Jesuit. It's not his fault. And when he was a young man, they lived in Mexico City. He was dying, and his father went to the shrine of Guadalupe and said to the Virgin, either take him or leave him. And by the time he got home, the son was well. So what I did is I placed a little tiny Guadalupe here. You see? And here it says, Via Cristo Rey, long live Christ the King. And his halo usually is just a red line and a white line, but since the color of the Mexican flag has got red, white, and green, I put a green line in it. He was accused of an attempted assassination on the president of Mexico because his brother had bought a car from somebody, and that car was used, but they were not responsible. So he and his brother were arrested along with someone else, and in order to make a show of him, to show the people how great the government was, they photographed the execution. and it went worldwide with the newspapers, and so it backfired. And so at his funeral, which they were forbidden to have, there was over 70,000 people came to his funeral at the Church of the Holy Family in Mexico City. So Miguel Pro. The next image is Bernadette Soubirous, whose feast day is coming up soon. And Bernadette Soubirous is the visionary of Lourdes. She left Lourdes, never returned, went to Nevers, where she became a sister of charity, I think. And here she's just shown in her peasant dress. These are not canonical icons. These do not, they follow the canon, but they cannot be used in Orthodox worship. They could be used in Byzantine Catholic worship, but not in Orthodox worship. These I refer to as my devotional icons. And this way, yeah, I'm a heretic anyway for some of them, but this would even be worse. And here is Oscar Romero. These are very early pieces. This is Oscar Romero, who was beatified, and thank God Francis is going to soon canonize him, and he should, as being a martyr of El Salvador. And he got caught up in a lot of nonsense because he was for the poor and the rich were not. The rich kind of funded the church. And then after he died, they kind of like tried to squash his cause. And then a certain group got in, bishops who kind of hid it even more. And then John Paul II, one of the things he did right before he died is started to open the investigation again, and Francis beatified him and will canonize him, which I think is great. Here's just a simple icon of St. Paul. This is from a diocese. A diocese is a set of panels that run across the top of an iconostasis, which is a wall of icons that separates the sanctuary from the nave. And this one, as you can see, Paul is facing inward. So it would be, Paul would be here. Next to him would be John the Evangelist. Then there would be Christ in glory. Then there would be the Mother of God. And then there would be St. Peter. And if you're a wealthy church, you'd have two more sets and two more sets until the whole band across of the diocese is done. It's above the main doors, the royal doors. And here's Paul's just holding his book. This was used for the year of Paul. This is the centerpiece of that. So if Christ was to stand up, he would be twice as big as the figures on either side of him. And on this one, we have the four evangelists. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we have cherubim, seraphim, thrones, dominions. All the 9 choirs of angels are painted, and they're painted transparently. That means they're like looking through a stone. It's the best, like an emerald, and there's a painting inside the stone, or an etching on the stone. So that's how they're done. This was commissioned for the sisters, the Carmelite sisters in Denmark, Wisconsin, for their hermitage. And it's Christ at the house of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. There's a reason why this is this large space here. This is for whoever the sister who is on retreat could place herself there. And so Christ has got his hands on the table blessing the food. And we have Lazarus here, Mary, and there's Martha. Now, this is an image called the bridegroom, Christ the bridegroom. And we know when we see these images, if the artist saw the Shroud of Turin. If he saw the Shroud of Turin, you only see 4 fingers. Because once the nail goes through here and hits the nerve, the thumb goes in. So if you see one like this, you know the artist did not see the shroud. But when it's bent under, as in this one is, you have 4 fingers showing, then you know he has or she had seen the shroud. It looks like he's coming out of something, and he was. There was in the Church of the Bacchanaia in Constantinople, where the shroud was for many hundreds of years, there was a pulley system, and every Friday they would raise it from the head to the groin, so you see the hands. And so that's the image that they, now there's been a red cloak put on, and sometimes it's a purple, sometimes there's no cloak at all. Sometimes there's a cross behind it, sometimes there isn't. And of course the initials ICXC for Jesus Christ. This is an image of Our Lady of Kazan and Kazansky, or as the Poles say it. They would run up to me during the exhibit and they would scream at me because I forgot, I did English, Italian, and French and forgot to do the catalog in Polish. So the Poles went crazy. The little old ladies came up. They almost like attacked you, you know. The Kazan icon has a long history. It was found. This young lady found it, buried. It became a miraculous icon. Many different miracles happened through the intercession of the Mother of God with the Christ child. It then all of a sudden appears in the Tsar treasury, and it's framed in gold and silver, and it's got stones and jewels and pearls, you name it. Every emperor, every Tsar and Tsarina placed jewelry on it in thanksgiving for different things. It was the standard by which the Russians would go into the into battle. The army would use it as a standard. The history of the one, even though the Russians will not say yes, the history of the one that was shown at the World's Fair in a small chapel next to the Pietà when it was in New York City, that icon was purchased from a woman in Windsor, England. Once it was purchased, it disappeared. It then showed up in Fatima, in the Orthodox chapel in Fatima. And after John Paul II, the attempted assassination, he went a year later to Fatima to give thanks for his life being saved. He went and he saw that icon, and about 3 to 4 weeks later, the icon disappeared again. Only found out that it was in his private bedroom in the Apostolic Palace. They used to be called the Legion of Mary. They don't call them now. I forget what they call themselves. Anyway, they gave it to him. He took it back. He was using that icon, along with the Patriarch of Moscow, as a playing card to get an invitation to Moscow. So a year before he died, when he realized it was not going to happen, because you have 2 Slavs, remember? 2 hard-headed people who could not see eye to eye. He gave it to Walter Kasper, Cardinal Kasper, who brought it back to Moscow, and it was the 28th of August, the day that the Chechen rebels attacked the school and killed all those teachers and children. So it was a happy day, and it was also a sad day for Russia. So now it's back in its own cathedral. Of course, the Bolsheviks, it disappeared the night of the Bolshevik Revolution. So nobody knows who took it, but it ends up in Windsor. So you figure it out. So the Kazan icon is very important. And Christ is only his hand is up in blessing, and he has his other hand is hidden. There's no hands for Mary, and on Mary it has, in Greek, Theotokos, God-bearer. And then, of course, it has, in the halo of Christ, we don't see all the letters, it said it's the I am who am. when Moses asked the burning bush, "Who are you?" And the bush answered him, God answered him, "I am who am." So this is a standing icon. This is a reversible icon. I don't know. No, this is not reversible. This is one-sided. These traveled, and they're anywhere from 5 by 7 to 8.5 by 8 by 10. So this is another one of the head of Christ. Again, showing the pointed beard, the locks of hair falling down each side, and then the I am who am, and then Jesus Christ into it. Here's another of the bridegroom image. This is our Mother of Good Counsel image. So this is taking already a fresco painting, which is about yay big, and then doing it in a longer format. This is Our Lady of Cambrai. When Bernadette saw Our Lady, she used to call, before she knew the name, she used to call her that thing in that French dialect. So when the statue was done that we see now, that's in the grotto, they brought it to her and they said, "This is your description," and she said, "No, it's not." And I think the women of the town paid for it, and they were very upset that she didn't think it was the image. So the Mother Superior pulled her to the side and said, "Just say it's the image. Let's get the heck out of here." So she said, "Yeah, that's right." But the Bishop of Nevers was very upset that the image was not what she saw in the grotto. So he had a book on images of the Blessed Virgin. Obviously it was in black and white, which was a new, photography was just starting and moving along, and so he showed her all these images. And this is the one of Our Lady of Cambrai. And she said, "This is what Mary looked like when she saw her at the grotto." And if you go to Lourdes and you go to the underground church, there's a very large image of this painting. This is one of like 500 Augustines I've done. This is Augustine of Hippo again. This is a Duccio copy to size. When the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City bought the only Duccio in private hands, they paid $40 million for it. And someone said, "Well, where did they get the money?" I said, "They had a cake sale." But I was infatuated with it, and since I couldn't buy it, I did my own. So she's traveled a lot. Those of you who know my stained glass, this is one of the windows. We all have favorites. This is one of my favorite windows for a number of reasons, as well as the Our Lady Guadalupe window in the law school chapel. If you don't know, our law school has a chapel, very beautiful chapel, and it has a 6-foot or maybe 7-foot round image of Our Lady Guadalupe, and then it has St. Augustine as the magistrate, St. Augustine Novella, the lawyer, and St. Yves, the patron of lawyers. But this is in the nursing school, little chapel, and this is Blessed Katharine. She was an Augustinian, came from France to the New World, and kind of started the first hospital. And there she is, she's in a white habit, the boat that brought her, and the children she dealt with, the native children that she dealt with. This is Fabiola. Fabiola was a friend of Jerome. She lived in Rome, Saint Jerome, the translator of the Vulgate. And we have here, usually you see just the profile of her. Someone did a painting, named it Fabiola, and so all the paintings of Fabiola is this profile. But she's always shown dressed in red. And so I kind of like took a little liberty. Here it has that she was born in France and she died in Canada. It's the maple leaf and the fleur-de-lis. Here we have Fabiola. We have SPQR for the Senate and the People of Rome, or if you know Italian, it also could mean those Romans are pigs. And there's also a shamrock, which I did for Louise, and she said, no, it's the Augustinian, the Irish background of the Augustinians. I said, well, it's not true, the Irish background of the Augustinians, but anyway. And of course, there's a Roman column there. And she's holding in her hand an image of the School of Nursing. This is Florence Nightingale, and she has a candle in her hand, and she has all kinds of foliage that was used for making medicine, medicinal plants. And this was when she was in the Crimea. And so we have the crescent and the moon together. And I forget what constellation I used. Let me think. It could be Orion. I kind of like to use and then put them in and then let them go crazy about after I die why it's there. The last one is, we didn't want to put another female. We didn't want to put another white person. We wanted to put somebody in there that really meant something. So we chose an African-American nursing student, a male. He's in there wearing the uniform, and he has in his hand a document concerning the School of Nursing. And then since a lot of our alumni are in the service, there's a water, fish, and there's also an anchor for a sign of hope. Now, the exciting part. We're almost finished. This is called the Madonna of Tears. In the city of Siracusa, in Sicily, in the 1950s, this image started to cry. And they collected the tears from the image, and they had them analyzed, and they were human tears. Now, the plaque is about ½ inch thick, except for where the hands and the face are. That's about maybe 1.5 inches thick. It's very low bas-relief, and it's not that big. It's about maybe 12 by 10 inches. But it started to cry, and it cried for 3 days. The image didn't say anything. It just was on the outside of someone's home. Someone noticed it, and then they put a cover over it. Then they brought it inside, and then finally they built a very ugly basilica in the shape of an upside-down tear to put her in. But I took her image, and then I took her face image, and I changed the color, and I ran it on either side, and that little thing down at the bottom is the reliquary where the tears that have now crystallized, you can see them in that little reliquary. And then it's been augmented. Every face of the Virgin has a crystal for tears coming down, and it's all beaded up and it's all gawked up, and there's a lot of stuff on it. But these are my contemporary icons. These are taking things from life and mixing them mechanically and coming out with an image. The image itself is 18 by 22, and then of course the frame, which is called an edicule. They're the ones that appear on the sides of houses and the street corners all throughout Europe. And I was going to start watercoloring them, and I realized I wanted to do them the size, and I figured, I'm going to get killed by a car, if I have to sit to get a good image. That's why I started photographing. So now these are just saints Some of these are Sicilian saints. This is Agatha, and Saint Agatha is the patron saint of women who have breast cancer. And as you see, they make a little cookie on her feast day, January 5th, which is a little sugar cookie with a little red cherry in it, representing the breast with the nipple in it. Now, what has happened since these were raw, so right now in front of that there's a transparent silk veil just covering the breast part. But she's wearing a crown that most of the jewels on the crown were given by Richard the Lionheart, because he visited her tomb there. And of course that's her head, which is not really her head is all dried up. And they said that when her head was chopped off, she finally died, every place it dropped, a fig tree grew. And an olive tree, not a fig tree. You put anything anywhere in Italy, an olive tree grows. So anyway, that's why on the top, you'll see these olive branches. And this has all been like moved around. Sergius and Bacchus, I do a lot of warrior saints, male warrior saints. And so I took a magazine, I wrote to the company in Italy, the photographer. I am still, from 2010, still waiting for an answer, to use the image. But I changed it so much that it looks nothing like the original photograph. Plug in or find another power source. Okay, where do I plug into? Well, I'm going to go through this quickly.
An electric? Yes. Something about the electric?
I don't have the cord for this. Well, anyway, so what I did is I put shields on them, and they're carrying swords, and I got rid of their assault weapons and put halos on them and cloaks, and kind of changed some of the wording on the back to help us see. Okay, this is Saint Rosalia. She's also, with Lucy, Agatha, and Rosalia, is one of the patron saints of Sicily. And she was a hermit. She died in a cave, and the cave grew over, and they found her, and her body was intact. It's not so intact anymore. And so using the rose as her name, and again, this is all kind of augmented with different things. Oh, you don't see that, okay. This is from the Shrine of St. Rosalie, and I call this Our Lady of the Universe. And she's holding in one hand, she's holding the Ecce Homo, Behold the Man, and then there's a crucifixion scene, and she has, we're dead. Anyway, it's boring. It's all the rest of the similar things. But what I did bring in to show you, we can turn the lights on. I don't know if there's a power cord here or not. What I did bring in is, and I'll finish up with this, is that this is an old copy. This is an old, this is from the Confraternity of the Precious Blood from Brooklyn, New York. And they sold these for like 10 cents a piece in, I think it was the 20s. And this is one of them. And it shows you the dead Christ. And it shows you, you know, the reason why it's so straight is that his mouth was tied up. so to keep the mouth from opening during after death. So we have the Shroud of Turin, we have the Veil of Montepello, and then there's the Sudarium of Ovid. And if you look at those things enough, you start to see something. And what it is, they all came from the same person. All the blood types the same. It's all AB. AB, which is the rare one.
Oh, negative.
No, this is AB something. Yeah, negative probably. And there's only the female chromosome. There's no male chromosome. So this was what people saw after Secondo Pio took the first photograph at the end of the 1800s. The Vatican, on the fifth Sunday of Lent and on Good Friday, the canons, they're the priests who are obliged to say the office for the church. They are in charge of the relics of the Passion, and they bring it out on the balcony. And if you saw anything about Benedict, when Benedict became Pope, in the background you see a beautiful Bernini sculpture of Veronica running with the image of the face. Well, above that is a balcony, and behind that balcony is probably it's tighter than Fort Knox to get in there. Believe me, I've been trying for 23 years. So they would hang out. They would bring out this thing and bless the people with it. Well, it looked all brown. It looked all brown, but we have people who wrote that what they saw, and they said they saw a small square, they called it linen, small square linen with the face of a man with his eyes open and his mouth open. And you see woodblock prints up to a certain point. When the Basilica of St. Peter's, the new one was being built, the old one was still inside, remember. They built the old one. They built the new one around the old one. And the first column they put in was the Veronica column, because the first thing they took out of the old church was the Veronica, relic of the cross, whatever, all the pieces that had to do that Helena brought back from the Holy Land, our first female archaeologist, church archaeologist. So this image, Martin Luther even said, he said, all I saw was a square piece of white linen. Well, it disappears. We hear records of it being passed around the Borgo, which are those streets that run from Vatican to the Tiber River. We hear that it was passed hand to hand, and then it disappeared. And in the 70s, there was an article written about this image. Now, the people in this village knew all along, but it was in Abruzzi. It was up in a hill town. And the furthest you could get, it might as well have been at that time, in the 1520s, it might have been the other side of the world. Because now it takes you 2.5 hours through the mountains. It would take you forever to go from Rome, clear across to Montepello, which is in near Chieti, which is a small town in the Abruzzi. So, and it's on top of a hill. And one day there was this doctor, the doctor of the town. Someone came, the tradition is, someone came to him and said, keep this. And as he went down to open it, he looked up, whoever gave it to him had disappeared. And he opened it and he kind of saw something, but really wasn't clear. And it's still not clear today, but it is clear and it's not clear. It all depends how you look at it. So it was in that town, and then eventually in like 1790, the Capuchins, it was given, of course, to the Capuchins. You know what the Franciscans do. They order the buses and the candles, and then they have the miracle so that all the pilgrims come. That's a bad joke. Anyway. So It's in the Capuchin church, and it was just on a side altar, unlit. You couldn't see it. And then finally, a German journalist did a small article on it. He heard about it. And then you heard nothing more. And then a Sister Pascalina, who was a Trappistine nun in Germany, was the infirmarian, and she went around taking care of the sisters, and she looked up and she saw this face. And she said to the sister, "Where did that come from?" And she said, "From a magazine." "Well, where's the rest of the magazine?" She said, "I threw it out." So she was able from the back of it to get enough information, and she started researching it. And what she found out is that if you take a transparency of either the shroud or the veil of Montepello and put them one on top of the other, it's the same face. So the Shroud of Turin is Christ of Good Friday, or the dead Christ, and the veil of Montepello is the Easter Christ, the risen Christ. So this is what the Montepello looks like. So the lips are open, showing teeth, and it's almost, you could hear him saying, and unlike the Shroud of Turin, you could get that close to it. Where the shroud, you're about 15 feet away. I've been here a number of times to see it, and every time I've been there, you see something different. When you walk into the church, you see nothing but a square white cloth that Luther saw. If you go up and turn sideways, now it's not a hologram, there's an image. And they found out that it's made with muscle. It's muscle cloth. That means at the end of Sardinia, there is a group of mussels that have an excretion that comes out, and that excretion grows to maybe 3, 4, 5 meters. And they have people who dive down, cut the excretion off, and you need a lot of it. And then they wash it and they clean it and they weave it into cloth. It's the most expensive cloth in the world. It used to be called emperor's cloth. And what they figured out is that since Mary Magdalene was independently wealthy because of her husband, because Mary Magdalene is not the Mary Magdalene caught in adultery. There's 3 Marys. Somebody put them all together. So to give Mary Magdalene her due, she was a wealthy widower.